Welcome to The Artistic Process, proudly brought to you by Movement Apparel. Check them out on Instagram and visit movementapparel.ca for their latest trends. Don't forget to use my discount code at checkout, I am an artist, for 15% off. This is an incredible local brand built with love, and I'm so proud to be sponsored by them. I am your host, Giulia Tripoli, and this is episode 5, The Artist and the Bowtie Philosophy. Our guest today is a certified leadership management international facilitator, a coach and speaker, a diversity and inclusion specialist. He is the founder and CEO of Bowtie Leadership and Development Incorporated. Want to know all about the Bowtie philosophy? Let's get started. It is my honor to welcome Dr. Bowtie Todd Jenkins to the podcast today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Mama G is so excited to be here. What's up?
I am so excited to talk to you. I first and foremost have to thank our girl Amy because I first saw you on Brown Sugar Talks and I felt this immediate pull to your energy and your aura. And I am beyond excited to talk to you about all things glorious today. I want to start first and foremost. You're going to have to explain the bow tie. You're going to have to give me that journey from little Todd until now, Dr. Jenkins. I would love to hear how all of this came to be because you are a coach and speaker and a leadership management facilitator, all around amazing human. How did the beginning of this journey start and get me until now?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's been very, very interesting journey, or even as I reflect to think about how did I arrive to this moment and this platform and my passions today. And I must start back as I was raised in the inner city of Columbia, South Carolina, raised by a single mother. At times as a youth, growing up, I did not know basically that we were in the inner city, that we're in a low income area of our town. I did not know that because my mom did everything in her power to ensure that, of course, everything I needed as a child, I always had. And so I didn't understand that piece until I continued my education. But I would say as a little boy, I was always interested and curious of conversations as well. Of course, I was involved in sports and just really, really following, really behind my mom a lot. My mom played basketball. And it's funny because I never tell that story as much, but my mom played basketball while in high school. So we definitely had some of those genes, I guess, flowing through the family life cycle there.
Right.
So I was very involved in that. But another piece of this, and in my hood, you are very you become very creative. Just coming up with different activities, just various things on in the parks, creating things as a kid. Like you create these little piles of dirt and then think of it as a castle and think of it as an army base.
Yes.
We did all of that. And also outside of the hood, it was a church in the back of my hood, and it was a white church, and they will always come down to do mission work. And I started getting very involved with that church. And it's so funny, they stopped at our apartment first, my apartment, or my mother's apartment, because they believed that if I came, all the other kids from the block will come as well if they saw me coming. So, and I tell you this because I'm thinking back and I'm like, wow, look at the leadership development happening there. But as we kind of move forward, I got very involved with the church, and we used to go to this camp every summer where I started to see a different world. A different world. This was like an old Boy Scout camp. And at this camp, we learned how to canoe. I learned how to swim. I learned outdoor survival. Just various skill set that I probably would have never had the opportunity to learn based on where I lived. And so religion and my faith was a very, very big part and essential part of me growing up also with the support of my mother and all my aunties. I had a village, I had a community that
Right.
actually helped raise me, if you will. And so throughout that journey, I remember that I tested and went to another school district, which was a white school district. For anyone who may not have seen my picture and you're just listening, yes, I identify as an African American male. And so I was raised in the South of the United States, and it was very segregated based on my school zones and et cetera, of how I was raised. And so
Mm.
I was able to test into another district, which was the white district. And the only reason I was able to go to that district is because my grandmother worked as a custodian in the white district. And so
Oh,
I was able to go to that school. And that's when I started really seeing outside of the white church a lot more other individuals that looked different than me. And then my grades were starting. I made my first B. It was like it was very different curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. But I say all that to say is that at that time, I feel like my life was being curated to where I'm at today because I started to explore differences, different identities, and different subgroups that I never once knew if I probably would have continued to stay in my bubble in the hood. And
mm.
so as I continued that journey and went on to college, of course, I was very, very curious on studying the brain. And so I went and studied psychology and sociology. And I wanted to know how can other people look like me get into these networks and circles to thrive? Because I started to see as I continued to progress, the more I progress into my collegiate career, the less people I see across the room that look like me. And I'm like,
Whoa.
I was curious, like, why is that? I was very aware that I was almost the only one at all times in high school or in college. And so as I continue to explore that, I felt like I wanted to really understand the mind and the mental blocks because that's what I thought it was at that time in college. I said, well, you know what? It's internal. It's internal mental blocks that's and barriers that's keeping people who look like me to achieve. And I wanted
Mm.
to unpack that. Well, that's why as I started to explore that journey, I started to see that it's not just a mental block. That's a piece of it. And so I started to look in sociology. And it's deeper than your mental capacity. It's about also so many other social factors and barriers that can help facilitate the way you see yourself and what is ingrained in your mental capacity. And so
Right.
that aspiration took me into academia where I wanted to be that change that I wanted to see. And so I said, you know what? I want to be in collegiate affairs and in academia where students show up, they see someone who looked like them. I wanted to solve that problem that I never had, or that problem that I always explored and continue to see while I was an undergraduate. So that's what I did. I went off to higher education, received my doctorate, but my doctorate also took me to another journey. I started to really unpack my research areas, basically focus on minority perception. So I studied how does minority professionals perceive their supervisor in the workplace. And so
Oh,
I thought that was very, very critical because so many times you can't really always control like your social environment based on where you live. But a unique relationship that everyone usually have in an organization is someone you report to, your supervisor. And so I wanted to unpack that more and really see how people are showing up in that space based on race, class, and gender. And so that's a lot of what I researched in. And then I started to notice, of course, where this is where the bow tie come into play. I've been a part of a fraternity, a historically African American fraternity, or historically Black fraternity. Of
mm.
course, we're integrated today, but historically, I wanted to just let everyone know, just to let everyone know. But I would say I started to see what does Black excellence look like outside of my family, outside of my mother. What is Black
Wow.
excellence? Other male figures that are doctors and lawyers, and I joined that fraternity while in college. And that's when I started to see an image that I never seen before. Even in the church, I never saw this image, and it was successful Black men. And some of the common things that I saw was they wore bow ties, and that was something I did not know. really what that was. And so I started wearing bow ties when I continued my education. And it just didn't stop there. It was not only, it's fun. Bow ties are fun because it doesn't get in the way of like when I'm eating. It's like quick. I could put it on. It was making a comeback. And
Yes.
I would say to that point, it was very, very interesting about the bow tie because I started to travel, and where I wear, even to this day, when I wear a bow tie, people come up to me and they are genuinely curious. Like, did I tie it myself? Where did I get it from? And they acknowledge my presence. And I just thought it was very, very interesting. And so I started, and this happened all around the world. 'Cause I do a lot of global traveling, and people even in Korea, they pronounce it as Botox, but it was very interesting how they showed up and saw bow ties, and they just are curious. And so I started to think, well, what if we can continue to create these spaces where people, humans, are genuinely curious into each other, where race has not been a barrier why, or class or gender has not been a barrier why you choose not to engage. Because at that time I felt, or in those moments I felt, people are not coming to engage with me because or they're choosing not to because of my race or my gender. They're just curious about something I have around my neck. And so what I did was that led me until today. And the movement is that I created an acronym and a philosophy that if people can show up every day and be genuine and curious and bold to ask questions, engage, unravel, and connect, we can really improve humanity. And so the bow tie is an acronym of how you can show up every day in a conversation. So B stands for, in any conversation, you should be mentally present. O is to be open to new ideas. W is be willing to share your own story and own your own truth. And of a bow tie, that knot in the middle is usually the challenging part of a conversation. A lot of people can't tie that knot. And that's the TIE. How do you tie the conversation together? How do you lead the conversation better than you came in? And I think, honestly, if we can continue to bow tie dialogues every day, we will improve the place and areas in which we live. And so my mission today is every day I wake up to create spaces for all humans to belong and thrive together, one bow tie combo at a time. So that's Dr. Bowtie Todd. My heart and my space is definitely around human empathy and compassion, but my practice, and what I do every day is really trying to further the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion on and off the clock. So
I am
that
in
is me,
complete
Mama
awe.
G.
That is amazing. My face hurts from smiling. That was just like such a good story, and you're so right, because if there's that conversation starter, if you can break down that wall for people to understand that you are just another human, and we can have this conversation and open up this conversation, and then we can continue to have the uncomfortable conversation, then we are completely limitless. I remember my mom always telling me, make sure your hands are clean and your nails look nice, because a first impression is
Mm.
important, especially with that handshake. Now it's a little different because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but that's something that resonated with me at all times, is the importance of a first impression. And if somebody doesn't want to talk to me, then I lose my battle right away. But you have somehow managed to find a way to open that up with something as simple as a colorful, bow tie. Like I think it's so genius. An acronym. I'm going to wear a bow tie all the time. It does create a really nice conversation starter, and it did make a comeback. And I was going to ask you if you were doing the genuine ones or the clip-on ones. Either way, they're still cool. But I've tried to
No,
tie a real bow tie.
come on, Mama G. I'm definitely a stuff tie. I'm gonna let the listeners know I tie all my ties myself. And the beauty, and I think to your point, I think I know exactly the beauty of the bow tie philosophy is that yes, you may know bow ties show up in a physical necktie, but it's a philosophy that you can wear every day by how your heart and
Mm.
mind shows up. So I want people to understand that the bow tie is not necessarily something you got to go buy. It's something that comes out of your heart and mind, and you put into practice with your
Woo.
hands and feet.
Oh my God. I just want to be your friend until the end of
You
time.
are my friend. Come on.
Yes. I thank you, thank you, thank you. And from this philosophy and from this standpoint, and you growing up and wanting to be the change and wanting to solve these problems, you saw that there was an issue in the inclusion of the community, and you started developing ways that we can come together. And I wanted to hear some of your secret tactics on community inclusion, because I feel in the dance world, we need more community at this moment and less competition. I would love to hear your insight on that.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I let's start with some positional terms because I think so many times, based on culture and climates and parts of the world where you live, you may show up to the space of inclusivity a little bit different. So, what I would do is let me define diversity, equity, inclusion, and how I position those terms. When I think of
Mm.
diversity, diversity is twofold. Diversity is visible and invisible differences that make a human complete. Okay, so visibly, I know you all may not, you're listening to my voice, but you may see my picture, and I'm a nice, good looking brown guy with a bow tie. Okay, so that's my
Eh,
visible difference. But invisible difference, you may not see from my picture that I'm one of 13 kids. I can follow Portuguese and habla español, and I
woo.
love to travel on the plane, but I'm afraid of heights. So I want
I'm
people to understand. I want people to understand diversity is twofold, and those visible and invisible differences are equally as important of someone's identity. So the way people think, their mindset, their ideas, their belief, their orientation, as well as how they show up. So that's number one. Diversity is twofold. Now, inclusion has been able to create an environment and a space and a culture where all of those visible and invisible differences are brought together to feel as if those individuals belong, that they're seen and heard. And I put heard in my definition because how many of you all know you could be doing a lot of talking, but that does not mean anyone is listening. And so it's very, very
mm,
important for to have true inclusion in your organization or on your team or in your troop, your dance troop, etc., that people are seen and heard. Now, you also have to go the next milestone of treating people in an equitable way. So many times I work with leaders and they say, Todd, I treat everyone fair and equal. Well, think of this metaphor of a shoe. Okay. I love brown shoes, by the way. And matter of fact, Mama G, you get a shoe. All your listeners get a shoe. It's like Oprah. Everybody gets shoes, okay?
you're
And
gonna,
the
you're
interesting
gonna shoot.
piece about this is this is equality, right? I'm going to give everyone a shoe, and everyone will get a shoe. Now, equity is giving everyone on this call that's listening and you, Mama G, a shoe that fits you. That's equity. Now you got to think
Mm,
about that because
mm.
see, I wear a size 11 shoe. Yeah, I love the color brown shoe. Mama G, what if you don't mind sharing being a little vulnerable here, but what is your shoe size
Mm.
and your favorite color shoe to wear?
Shoe size is 8, and I would love a nice
Okay.
neon yellow shoe, please. Yes.
Oh, yellow. Okay, so Mama G, how would you feel if I
Mhm.
told you to wear my size 11 brown shoe to work every day?
Well, that would just be a little bit uncomfortable and not really my thing.
Okay, but listeners, check this out. Listen to what Mama G just said. She said that would be a little uncomfortable, but it may not be her thing. But what she did not
Mhm.
say is, Dr. Jenkins, I refuse to wear your shoe, and I'm not going to wear it. People, I want you guys to understand that we have people showing up to our teams, showing up to our organizations, showing up to our communities every day with shoes that was given to them that they are forced to wear and they're very uncomfortable, but they are wearing them. And
Ugh.
you have to understand, why does that matter? Why does that matter? What are you talking about, Dr. Jenkins? Thank you for asking everyone. Why it matters is because if you treat people in an equal way and give them what feels right to you and give it to them, it may not be what they want. So, what we're striving for in this DEI space is for you to treat people how they wish to be treated, and you're going to give them things that fits them and give them the access to the resources so we can all thrive and more than just survive. So in the dance community, this is so important because the dance is, it's a community, it's a beautiful community, but it also have some skeletons that we can talk about, because this
Mm-hmm.
is very very true. When you go into dancing, right, and I'm not a dancer, but I would tell you I believe in arts and culture, and dancing is an expression, it's a lifestyle, it is a movement, it's a story, and it's community and it's culture, it's so much, it's powerful. And if as a dance team you can't treat each other how they wish to be treated, that will also come out in your production.
Mm.
And you have to think about that. What does that mean? Well, if you're not practicing some of these strategies within your own community and your own team, when you perform together, it may be a great show, but the way the story is told, it may be broken because everyone does not feel as if they're a part of this team. So it's very important in this work that you do a reflection. It's very important that in this work that you really get to know each other and ensure that people have a sense of belonging and that they're heard and seen, especially as we work together. And because dancing is so important, it's vital to the lifeline of this ecosystem because it's expression, and you bring people together. Your dancing, arts, and culture bring the community together. And it's beautiful when we can get it right,
Mm-hmm.
because the story that you tell, you are inspiring so many young people. You're also painting the narrative to your community of what should be portrayed. And so if you don't practice that, how do you expect for that to be your outcome?
Mm. Mm. I hope everybody at home is taking notes right now. And that's why I called this podcast The Artistic Process, and understanding that as we are working on our craft, we have to be working on ourselves, the artist. And
Mm,
as, let's say, dancers, dance teachers, choreographers, recognizing that all people are different. They learn different, they heal different, they feel different, they perform different. And if you're going to judge a fish for not being able to climb a tree, you have your entire principle completely wrong. We have to be able to, like you said, offer the right shoes for the right people
mhm.
and make
I
that
agree.
an
I
important
agree.
staple in educating. Wow. Wow. It makes so
and
much
and and,
sense to
and I do, like Mama G, I do believe, like, I'm not going to criticize the dance community at all, because I believe a lot of what I my experience in different troops and different organization agencies. I do believe the dance community does a great job of helping people learn and grow their skill set, and as well as develop their crafts. However, I just want to challenge people of what narrative and what stories are you portraying and telling. And also, don't
Yes.
forget about the unseen and unheard. And they're just as vital to the stories that you should express and tell. And so I know
Mm,
sometimes those narratives are controlled by agency leaders. And if the
right.
agency leaders are not doing these self reflections, of course, they're bringing up a troop and a community that may not be progressing the work that we're all trying to do, which is trying to make our communities better than we found it. So I think I want to also acknowledge that I see some great work out there being done, and I do understand the power structures in any organization. But it's great to ensure that the organization that you're being a part of as the dance community, the values, what are their values? I tell my clients all the time when they talk about D&I work and should we do it, I'll say your values will set you free, and your policies and procedures will keep you out of jail, and you need to look at both.
Ah, yeah. You need to look at both. And I think as people in the community, I'm starting to see myself a bit this way. And there's other people that I look up to that I know are also trying to do the right thing. It can be a question too of the power of no. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and being able to know your value, know your worth, that power of no, KNOW, but also the power of no, NO, and saying that to those that are up there who are not making the right decisions. If you don't see diversity on the panel, if there isn't proper inclusion, if there, are people up there not making the right decisions, how can we stand up and say no at this time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And of course, as a researcher, everything depends. So my recommendation, my thoughts is always depend. It depends on your situation, the climate, and the culture, as well as that organization standards. But I would tell you, I think it's so powerful what you just said. I think the first piece is you have to KNOW no to say NO no, right?
Hmm.
And so you have to be aware of what does diversity look like and what should be expected based on how you're facilitated or your part in their organization. But I would tell you, saying no has always been very interesting and challenging for humanity, especially
Hmm.
depending on where you live. But let's talk about North America. It's saying no is can be seen as insulting, etc. But I have learned in my work that I give my best yes and my best no's. And I would say I've learned to give my best yes because I know my mission, and I know who I am and I know whose I am. And so every time I get an opportunity,
Woo!
every time I'm in the space, I know every time I'm, engaged in an invitation, I'm going to give my best yes and my best no's because if it does not align with my values and my mission, I can easily say no. That's where I'm at today. However, in the space, I do understand there are different dynamics. And so first, you do want to have this awareness and understand the situation that you're in. And then you advocate, right? And understand as you advocate and you speak up and you challenge. You can also don't have a debate, right? So many times when we come into these difficult topics of making other people uncomfortable because talking about different cultural identities and the lack of diversity, usually the people in power are very uncomfortable because it seems like it's a shame and blame game. So first, just think about your lens. Think about your lens of how you come into the topic and you hold the accountability. Not saying that your lens are wrong or right. Just think about your approach. The next thing I would say, as you engage in holding people accountable, is understand once again, have a dialogue and not a debate, because when you have a dialogue, I have learned in my work that you can unpack some of how we arrived to this moment, because some people may not be aware that they are being unintentionally biased,
Hmm.
because we're all biased as human beings, but some people may not be aware. And sometimes when you come in to really say you didn't do this and this is, we talk about the outcome so much, but we don't really talk about the process of how we got there. And I think in my work, this is my approach of arriving to a no or arriving to accountability metrics and organization. I spend more time looking at the process and the journey of how we arrive to that moment or outcome, so we can potentially go back and unlearn or relearn some things so we can show up differently and better for all people. So if you have that patience, I know some people like listen, like I don't have time for all that. I'm going to just go up there and rip the band-aid off. That approach may work. I'm not going to say it's not going to work, but I tell people when they go into these conversations, it is not the time to YOLO a conversation. You only live once, because you want to have strategic change or systematic change. Sometimes that works. But if you're in that organization based on your position, you want to continue to stay in that organization, just think about your strategy there. Now, if you just want to, light fire and that's your approach, hey, you can do that as well. But just understand that any approach, they definitely have pros and cons, and you have to weigh that based on your situation. But I do believe that we are in this awakening where a lot more leaders are being engaged in the dialogue as well as the accountability that's going to make times and spaces for individuals to stand up easier than ever before. I think we're in that climate. And so, rightfully yours, I encourage people, to stand up, be bold, be courageous, because what you're doing is creating space not only for yourself, but everyone else who experienced that to be included in that next rollout or that platform, etc. So, I'm all about strategy and these approaches, but I do understand that everything depends and is situational.
Yeah, of course, of course. And speaking of depending and situational, we've all kind of been forced to redirect at a time of a pandemic, something that a lot of people were not ready for, were not fully being able to kind of understand of what it is that we are supposed to be doing. How do you feel the pandemic has perhaps shifted views on community, or shifted views on inclusion, or shifted views even on leadership? Because I've seen, certain companies not even take the right tactics to inform their employees that, there is a health and safety code that needs to be followed. Have you seen a massive shift as far as this pandemic in all of your, let's say, your research?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that this pandemic has definitely shifted a lot of companies, and we all understand and see how things have been shifted in our own communities, our own workplaces, but it's shifted also the approach. I wouldn't say shifted the approach, but more of heightened priorities around inclusivity in this pandemic.
Mm,
Number one, when you think about a company perspective, I've started to see that we have started shifting our approach to not metrics driven representation. It's more of now we're really focusing on, and this should have always been the approach, but once again, it's
right.
heightened. We're focusing on our employees' well being. So not only just how are you showing up to work, but how is your situation outside of work? What resources do you need to feel supported during these tough times as we go through this crisis? So mental health has been something that has been a lot more at the forefront of inclusivity and ensuring
Yes.
that your employees feel safe. Also, focusing on your employees and make sure they know the protocol of if they are working from home, or if you're a frontline responder or essential worker, what are the safety precautions that need to be in place? So, immediately our business starts shifting to, you need to over communicate. And also, if you don't know the answer, tell your employees that you don't know the answer. So this was the
Yes.
time that you as leaders, we were encouraging that you have to be totally transparent. You have to be authentic and also vulnerable, because you don't know everyone's situation. So if you
Right.
had the benefit as a company to move your workforce to remote, which is a privilege and a benefit, that calls from some other things and practices what people can do to continue to build inclusion remotely. But we also have some companies that was impacted that they could not do that based on their work, and they had to close shop. And we also seen that some companies did a lot of furloughs and laying off. As you all know, especially in the States, I mean, this is the highest unemployment metric that we had ever seen in history.
Mm,
And so due to that, this is where our lens come back into, because most of the communities that was impacted at a higher rate for unemployment and let go was usually frontline, who's usually the most at risk, or vulnerable communities or marginalized
mm,
communities. And so
mm.
that actually impact the entire life cycle of inclusivity work in our space, right? Because now we have, you had this organization pipeline to grow your workforce diversity representation. And most of organization, let's be real, most of the organization workforce diversity is usually on the front end of the organization and
Right.
not in the leadership, where it's the people of power. And so you just let go your whole front line, your whole diversity workforce
Mm,
there. And so
mm,
we told people to slow down, stop making these impulsive decisions, because you're really banking back on your comfortability, which is your biases. You're going back into your biased self, and your bias is going to show up when you have to think really fast and you don't slow down. And so the inclusion work has definitely has been interested in navigating through this and these unknown times. But inclusion is more important, I mean, than ever, because you have to ensure, for the first time, we've been telling people this forever in our work, take care of the humans that support your organization, because without them you're
yeah.
nothing, right? And so this is
Yeah.
what we continue to strengthen and continue to push forward. And so we have definitely seen some organizations getting it right. We have seen some organizations, they're on the struggle bus, But I would say all in all, it is a strategy, and it is a beautiful thing when the employers do what is right for their own employees and the communities in which they live and serve throughout these times. Because this pandemic is a world pandemic. It disrupts us all. We will, I don't think we'll ever get back to whatever we consider normal. It's going to be a new normal. And as we all, whether you're working or you're in a community organization, how you navigate this is going to be very telling of how you're going to sustain as an organization.
Absolutely. I myself own a dance studio, and as soon as all of this hit, I had to make the decision. I actually closed before we were forced to close because I thought health and safety first, make sure all of my students and employees are okay. And we've been offering free online classes since the beginning of the pandemic because I feel everybody needs a little bit of dance. And as we kind of navigate into this new space, I don't want to open yet until it's fully safe and making sure everyone's okay because there is still a massive pandemic happening. And what I do appreciate about the organizations that have been vocal about their unlearning and learning is I now have more respect for them because yes, nobody expected this. Nobody had this contingency plan already written. Nobody. No one was
Right.
ready for this.
Exactly.
And all we can do is learn as we go. And if people are admitting, okay, perfect, that didn't work, let's move on. I would rather people, like you said, slow down. Don't make any drastic maneuvers because that's where we make those mistakes sometimes that aren't as easy to reverse. When we kind of act on an impulse, it's the same thing with the current Black Lives Matter movement and everybody, rushing to repost something that ends up being, not an educated decision.
Right.
So this pandemic has kind of forced us into a sit down and listen situation, and almost, I think, a forced fast forward of things that were meant to be, in a sense, things that we needed in our world. We are being told to sit down and kind of realize that right now, and transitioning into the Black Lives Matter movement. And I would love to hear your views on this. We are all, still trying to figure out our lanes, whether we are individuals or brands or companies and businesses, and understanding that change is not a one lane highway, which my good friend Danielle Jocelyn has told me. And I appreciate we have to fight from all angles. So in the center of inclusion and community and leadership, when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, and I would love to also hear your thoughts on maybe things you could see the dance community doing. What are some, minor or major points that you have for us to move forward and make that situation a better situation?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think even coming out or navigating the pandemic, which will bring me into the movement, is that the pandemic, it also gave it gives us a lot of opportunities. It's major opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened in any crisis. It can offer up opportunities. And out of that opportunities, we are seeing more communities coming together. Like to your point, that's so beautiful that you were able to, go virtual and offer some sessions online and for free, because we have actually seen communities actively coming together to help the most vulnerable. And so we definitely have seen the advantages of working remotely and doing this virtual services, as well as reduction in pollution, right? No one is driving.
Crazy.
And so, I mean,
Crazy.
everyone is like, winning, but to a certain extent winning based on situation, because I'm not going to, discredit or make light of
Yes.
deaths and
Of
people
course.
who
Of
are
course.
impacted. So let me be very clear on that.
Of
And
course.
we're
Absolutely.
very blessed to be able to still have the opportunity to connect and work remotely, etc. Going into the Black Lives Matter movement, once again, tons of opportunities. The Black Lives, I actually know one of the co-founders. She's a friend of mine, but I would say that, this is nothing new, right? This is where we're
Right.
at today on this conversation. It's nothing new. The movement was in place, and it was in place to elevate and strengthen the platform to put Black people at the forefront of the conversations and everything possible. And
Mhm.
so where we at today of the awakening, like I tell people, we're dealing with two pandemics here. one pandemic the world recognized, which is COVID-19, and the other pandemic, racism, the world is slowly awakening up once again, trying to
Yeah.
awaken themselves. And just as I said, it has some correlation there because in any pandemic, it's a crisis. And unfortunately, this crisis of racism is something that we've been fighting before 400 years, and even before race was actually a concept and a construct. Oh man, I can go back into some history, but we'll talk about that later. But I would say to the point of today, what can you do? What are some things to be aware of? And I do see the advocacies happening. I've seen communities come together. We have seen the peaceful protests all around the world,
Mhm.
having this conversation around Black Lives Matter and what does that mean for your community. And I think, depending on where you live, etc., how one can organize a plan of involvement and engagement is really based on your community, based on your role, and how you seek to be a part of the solution and not the problem. I love what you said earlier. I totally agree about everyone can fight this in a different way, but we also see some wrong ways of fighting this, which is to be silent, which is
Mhm.
to act like to not acknowledge what is happening. Because
Okay.
when one does not show up to recognize, how can you articulate and change behavior if you're not aware and recognize that this is a problem? So if you cannot
Mhm.
identify the problem, you can't solve something you can't identify. And so I do believe that if you want to be a part of the change, and whatever that means for you, whether you're going to advocate at a rally or peaceful protest or holding your local government accountable, or you doing change within your own workplace, and most importantly in your own homes, right? That's where it really starts. It starts with your and I not necessarily your physical home, but your house, like in your heart, in your own mind. Where do
Yes.
you show up? It needs to start there. So many times when we have these crises, especially Black Lives Matter, so many people are asking, like, they want change, and everybody raise their hands. Who want change? Everybody raise their hand. But then I say, who wants to change themselves? You don't see a lot of hands raised. And so I always say the change, really, I know it sounds like, oh, his mushy mushy, but it's the truth. It's in research. Change
Yeah.
starts within your heart and in your brain. And if you don't have the change within there and you have that conviction and commitment, you're going to expect to not show up how you trying to perceive that you will show up. And so I tell people, number one, start reflecting of how you want to show up in this space and examining what you know and don't know, and go on the process and the journey to be a part of the movement. It is a movement, so you must move. You don't stay
Yes.
stagnant. You don't sit in your chair. You don't wait to another hashtag. You don't wait until another social media campaign. You can start moving within your own space, and whatever that looks like for you, that's for you. I think the dance community is such an incredible platform to continuing to strengthen the storytelling.
Mhm.
It's the dance community is so beautiful because it tells a story, but it's also a process of healing and hope. And I think the dance community can continue to do that and uplift Black voices, uplift Black narratives in your shows, in your expressions, in your platforms. Continue to do that because you are not only helping educate the community, but you're empowering the community. You're giving the community hope. You're also giving the community healing, especially during these tough times. So we need that expression. Whether you're going to do it virtually in your own home and put it on your social media, we need you not to sit silent. We need you, we need your craft, we need your skill, we need your love, we need your passion, and we want your expression, because the way you express yourself, I guarantee you, is someone else sitting in their homes waiting for you to show up so they can connect and grow and learn from you. And so as a
Mhm.
dance community, you are still as essential. I say that's how I consider myself as a diversity inclusion leader. I am
Wow.
essential workforce. I cannot turn off. My work is always on. And I think that's the same for the dance community. I think you're essential because that is the way, that's a lifestyle. And that's your way of showing up and servicing the world, as well as, living out your passion. And so this is not the time to turn off your passions. This is not the time to turn off your creativity, but this is the time to reflect and see how are you showing up? Because when you go to bed at night, you should think like, how did I show up today? And if you don't feel
Mm.
like that's aligned with that mission of your best yes for Black Lives Matter, I think you need to go back and think about it and look in the mirror, because you have to be okay with yourself. And so I do believe that it's a lot of research out there and sources how, depending on how you're showing up in the space, how you can learn to be advocate, how you can support Black and Brown businesses, Black businesses, how you can support Black artists, Black curators, Black. I mean, it's so much because, hey, as a Black man, I love my community and we bring it to the arts and cultures. And I could be biased here, but without that without that Black expression in arts and culture, oh, I don't know where we'll be at today. But hey, I digress. Just to keep us on the movement, Black Lives Matter. And honestly, we won't be able to win until we can see Black in all things beautiful and positive. And so that's the goal here. And that takes everyone hands on deck, fighting in the way that you want to fight, because it is a system. It's a system that you or I did not create. But depending on how we show up in our backgrounds, we could benefit or not benefit from the system. But it is our job to dismantle it because we're living in it. And especially if we want to leave our world better than we found it.
Oh my goodness. Put all of that on a t-shirt so that I can wear it at all times. And you're so right. People feel like because they did not create it, that perhaps it is not their problem, but it is currently the issue that we need to care about the most. And I want to thank you for kind of celebrating the dance world in that sense, because I do feel like we use a lot of the Black culture in our dance community, and it needs to be appreciated and put at the forefront more and celebrated more. And that's why dancers and dance studios and teachers have the responsibility to be using our voices at this time for this movement. I think it's vital. I think it's key. And if I could ask you to take your bow tie philosophy and give me a breakdown for Black Lives Matter, and if it can be a little bit in the dance community sense, I would love that too. But can you literally take your philosophy and break it down for me one more time in relations to this current movement?
Yeah. So, number one, let's go through the acronym. You need
Yes.
to be mentally present.
Okay.
Be mentally present. I mean, it's very, very simple, but sometimes it's very challenging to do because we have so many things that's distracting us and we don't want to be uncomfortable. But we need you mentally present in this space of Black Lives Matter, because when you're mentally engaged, you are now more in tune with your learning and your
Mm,
heightened awareness. Okay,
mm,
so that's the first letter of bow tie. Be mentally present. And the
perfect.
second letter is O, open to new ideas. It's very, very important that it's not a one size fit all. It's going to be things you hear. It's in it, like I say, it depends on where you at and where you live. But especially if you're someone who's not Black, it is actually your time to listen and to go and talk to the organizations in your community who's doing the work and see how you can be engaged and involved, right? So open to new ideas, and I do believe you should have an open mind and an open heart. But the next letter is W, willingness. Your willingness to share your
Mm,
story after you have been open and listening, right? You don't come in telling everybody, white guilt, white tears, right? That's not the approach there. The approach
got
is
it.
you come in to listen, be a student, and then when the opportunity arises, you share your story and share your eagerness to and willingness to continue to learn and wrap your hands around this movement and community. And the most
Hmm.
important thing is that TIE is tying it together. And this is critical because this is the action beyond the conversation. This is the action beyond the engagement and learning. I hear so much and I see so much, and I do agree with everyone needs to listen and learn or unlearn and relearn. I get that. But I'm as someone who's in the academic space, if you learn without going out to it doesn't change your behavior, you don't put that learning into practice,
Right.
it's really dead. And so I tell people you should be a student teacher. You need to be a student in the room of the Black Lives Matter movement, but you need to be a teacher to other white people who look like you. And if you can go out and teach that, it really changes the narrative. So many times in organizations, we are seeing the people of color, and especially for this, Black people are being taxed to tell their stories, and it's emotional. And that's the privilege of being white in the world, that you can listen and learn about this instead of experience it. And so I am telling people with the bow tie philosophy, be mentally present. We need you. Be open. It's gonna be uncomfortable, but be willing to share your story. But most importantly, tie it all together and leave that conversation better than you came in, to go change your behavior and be on the journey, be on the movement, have a sustainable behavior change so we can all transform lives of all people. And I know even in Canada, we talk about Black Lives Matter movement, and we talk about the first people of Canada, and it's similar. It's a lot of similarities that happens with a lot of groups, a lot of marginalized groups. And I'm telling you, it's so interesting that if you can learn to show up in this space today, you can really, really benefit from helping and champion all groups. And I think that's what Black Lives, what we're doing is that we are saying that we matter, because so many times in our history, we were always less than. We were told we were not beautiful. We were told that we're not strong. We were told that we could not get these opportunities, etc. And so we are wanting people to know that, yes, we matter. And so the bow tie philosophy, I hope that people will bow tie that together every day, on and off the clock. Because I tell people, I'm more curious to know what you're doing when I'm not in the room. When I'm in the room, I know you're going to respect me as a Black man, and you're going to be very, very, thoughtful of what you say. But I have to let people know all the time, don't let this bow tie or me studying at Harvard or me living in a nice neighborhood fool you. I am still Black in America and a Black man in America, and I have a heightened sense of awareness of when I leave the comfort of my home. I have to be alert because of the system that we all operate in. And so I hope, and my last point with you all is that allow this bow tie philosophy to take you into places that you never thought about before, and allow that to be your courage, allow that to be your boldness and your motivation to continue to be that change.
Mm. It takes real courage to grow up and be who you are meant to be, and you have this wonderful notion of being able to still rise by lifting others,
Mm-hmm.
and you saying champion all groups, and it comes from obviously such a personal space, but you taking the time today to help and educate. And I personally have enjoyed listening to you so much and have learned so much. And I truly hope that everyone takes this bow tie philosophy and wakes up every day with it, because I think it is something that can change our world. And I want you to know that you are an incredible person. I'm very thankful for this interaction, and we need people like you in this world, and you definitely, definitely matter to me, and I am forever grateful for being able to start all this with you. And I hope to have more conversations with you and learn so much more and keep learning more.
Likewise, Mama G, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for using your platform. And I think that's really, really beautiful. Not only just talking about the current situation and with Black Lives Matter, but using your platform to inspire and give hope to all communities, and especially the dance community. I think that's vital. We're all needed in this space today, and I think I've definitely enjoyed getting to know you, and look forward to many more dialogue and conversations. And I think it's very, very important that we continue to lift as we rise, or I say build or lift as we climb. Because if I'm only climbing and I'm rising, and I'm not doing the same with the people who look like me or any community or other humans, we're not changing the narrative. And so it's very, very important that people go out and share share what you're learning with others, share and mentor, sponsor people who are not in the room. If you're the only one who, like I told you guys earlier, I'm so used to being in spaces where I'm the only one. Well, I went through a time where I'm like, that took a toll on me. But then I flipped it because I said, I am the only one. And you know what? I'm going to make it possible that I won't remain the only one. And so utilize those spaces to trailblaze and change the narrative because you are purposely meant to be there. And so take advantage of that and ensure that you are lifting as you rise and climb, because that's how we're going to all really, really change this narrative.
I vow to continue to use my voice and my platform to help change the narrative. I thank you again for being here today. Dr. Bowtie, Todd Jenkins, I love you.
I love you too, Mama G.
Take care. So, as we learn to apply the Bowtie philosophy into all aspects of our lives, know that this will be a journey filled with self reflection and hard work. Do not compare yourself to others. They are running a completely different race. It is your road, your journey, your art, your process.